This is the Intermission Podcast.
We want to get to know our homeboys and homegirls and invite you into our space.
It's a whole mood of positivity.
The Intermission Podcast. Welcome back to the Intermission Podcast, a break with your homegirls.
This is the conclusion to Men Are Trash. But are they? And safe to our merry homeboys.
That's right. So listen, all good things must come to an end, right? But not before we do roll call. So I am Jessica E. Williams, aka CEO J. Will on IG.
And I am Jessie Denise.
And I'm Ivana. So today we have two of our amazing homeboys. First, I want to introduce our boy, Tony. He is a content creator. He is a comedian. He is my favorite First Fridays host.
Hello.
And he is the man that we have known from his singleness and now as a married man. So I can't wait to hear what he has to say.
And we got Roger as well, who is a trusted friend, advisor to all three of us. An incredible man. He is a first AD, that's a first assistant director in the industry, if y'all don't know, and a director extraordinaire in his own right. Stage manager, all around hustler. You heard me? And an incredible man of God. He does incredible stage managing at the church Hope's House. So he's a great man, great husband, great father. We're very excited for you all to hear what they got to say, because it's deep. It gets deep. So let's go straight into it. Let's go. Sir, gentlemen, go ahead. You can introduce yourself.
My name is Roger. And I'm Tony Price.
For sure. Man, it's so sad that it's the end. But it's going to be a great end. It's been quite the journey on this Men Are Trash situation. If you have not listened to the previous episodes or watched the previous episodes, please go back. It's been a lot of incredible information. So let's just jump right in. We're going to just jump right in and we're going to do it. Okay. So we actually want to start here because when we did our pre-production meeting the other day, the spirit was already moving. Okay. So in the spirit of pastors all over the world, this is not one of these moments where you don't want to take notes. You heard what I'm saying? You want to take notes. It's not if you're taking notes, it's when you're taking notes. So grab your little phone. I got mine. Okay. Grab a pen and paper, bring some people with you. Like y'all gonna want to have to do like an unpacking session after this. This is not just like, I heard it one time, I got it, I'm good. Nah, you need notes. Okay. Because class is in session. The pastors are at the pulpit, okay, and the altar is going to be open for those who want to repent or live a different lifestyle or whatever. The Holy Spirit is moving. Anyway, so we're going to get into it. So Roger, when we were talking, it was so many gems, and Tony, just gems. So you said a quote that really struck a chord, so much so that afterwards we was like, we're going to start with that. So you said part of being complete is owning yourself. Can you please expound upon that? Let me say it one more time in case they weren't listening the first time. Part of being complete is owning yourself. If you could please expand upon that, sir.
Well, I'll say that statement comes from there's a great movie, Jerry Maguire, right? Back in the day, everybody loved Jerry Maguire, right?
Show me the money.
Right? Everyone loved Show Me the Money. What they also loved was You Complete Me.
Yes.
Right? Everybody, like, folks heard that line and they was just like, oh my goodness, that You Complete Me. It's so amazing. It's just so much love. Cheers everywhere. But this idea of completion, this idea of being a real partner means being like a full person, right? It should be two complete people coming together. It's not like I'm lacking and I have this deficit and come and fill this gap in me. It's two complete people making a whole. So this idea of owning your own stuff, that's part of it, is being a complete person and an adult enough to own your own stuff and to deal with your own stuff. And that work has to happen pre-married, right? So that's all that preparation time of really addressing who you are and asking yourself those questions and giving yourself space to be able to ask those questions, and then get answers to them and work through them and owning your own stuff. And then in the partnership, it continues. It's not over. The partnership, it almost heightens because now you're facing new terrain, and now it's an opportunity to put that to work in your actual relationship, in your actual marriage, because it's easy to, culturally, we do a lot of finger pointing, and we do a lot of assessing problems over there. We do a lot of assessing fruit problems, but not root problems. Ooh. So we do a lot of that push out. But in relationships, for that stuff to really work, you really have to be willing to do the work and to work on yourself, own your own stuff, man. That was on you. You filed that up. That was on you.
Ooh. So many quotables. Tweet that, Black Twitter, if you're out there listening. Tweet this. Y'all be tweeting foolishness sometimes. Tweet this. Tone, you got anything you want to add to that, brother, based on what you heard, or you second that notion?
I've got my paper. Fruit problems and not root problems. Yes, absolutely. I echo most of it, only in the sense that, like, sometimes the audit is a little quicker for others, in the sense that the amount of time that you have to complete that circle, like, you always don't just run wet. You know, some people fall in a situation and you have to recognize that you do need to complete the circle, but it isn't like a long journey. You kind of have to get to it quick. You need to identify, look, this is going to fall apart if you don't make certain changes. And I think, like, the important thing, I think, like, you know, Roger was saying is that you got to get help, because if you don't know how to do it on your own, you will enter that union incomplete, right? Mm-hmm. Like, you know, so, like, I agree with 100% what he said. You first have to identify, like, what percentage download am I? Am I at 85%? Am I at 90? Mm-hmm. And if so, how much time am I going to need to get to 100 before I commit to this? And in some instances, you, like, a lot of people commit to it at 100% downloaded by the time they get to the altar. I don't know if that's right or wrong, but, you know, I concur with a lot of what he said. A lot of that has to be done on yourself. What's interesting is your woman can prove to be that catalyst. Like, she can prove to be the motivator to finish your work if you didn't have that fire in you yourself. And I'm okay with that too.
Big facts. Big fact. I love it. I mean, because key in what you said as well is getting help, right? Pride comes before a fall. That's not just like a cute saying. And I believe it's in the scriptures, because, you know, sometimes we be quoting stuff that's not there. But you know, you want to make sure if you don't got it, you don't got it. And no one's faulting you for that, but you want to make sure that you are covered and get the help that you need.
I agree with that. If I can, just the last bit. My wife and I are huge fans of marital counseling, premarital counseling, and marriage counseling. But to your point of asking for help, I feel like that's a great space to seek that out. Whether you have it at a local church, whether you have it through your medical professional, like whether you have it through your insurance, whatever the case may be. But this idea, like, to get a license, you have to, like, study, take a test, get a license. Like, you just marry a whole nother, you, like, join two whole lives together, and y'all just was feeling each other. Like, I need a book. I need somebody to be like, hey man, did you ask these questions? What about this? Did you think about this? So that type of help is really paramount, and mentorship along the way, you know, like, that continues. So yeah, I'm a big fan of the learning aspect that Tony was talking about, for sure.
Big facts.
And I've talked about, you know, premarital counseling before in other episodes, and Roger and his wife Adrienne were one of the counselors that, you know, we had. And when I have somebody else, I will be going to again, because I trust them. You know, I see their marriage. It's good as single people to have someone that you can look to and see, you know, like, okay, I can talk to this person and they're going to give me the real. Like, they're not going to give me the fluff, fancy stuff everybody wants to see. So I'm happy you mentioned the mentorship, because that's so important. And, like, I know a red flag for me would be a man who would say something like, I don't want to have, like, if they don't think it's important to have any type of mentorship or premarital anything, I'm like, that right there is a big
Wave the flag.
Waving of the red flag. That ain't even
100%.
Yeah, because even though my ex and I didn't get married, we still learned a lot, and we did really well in that. Like, we still learned a lot about ourselves and each other. You know what I mean? Even though we still 6 months later broke up, but during the class,
the class served its purpose, right? Because you went through it and you were asking yourself these tough questions,
right?
And then you got answers, and you said, okay, this isn't for us.
This didn't work.
That's a win.
Yeah,
didn't work out, but that's a win. Because otherwise, you gonna ask those questions on the other side of covenant, and now it's a whole nother ball game.
Yeah.
It's a problem.
I think a lot of people are getting divorced because they didn't get to seek out all of that stuff and uncover that stuff before and ask the right questions. Because one thing I know for sure is because Vaughn has shared a few questions that they have in there. And I was like, what in the world? Because my single mind would never even think about
that
those
part. Yes.
You know, so those are like, I definitely, I encourage marriage prep. That stuff is just really important, even more than marriage counseling, marriage prep, because that's a whole nother ball game. It's like a college course, 14 weeks. What?
Big facts. So speaking of, thank you, Jess, for that wonderful segue. Singleness. So we already talked to our single homeboys, right, about their evolution as men, and so we want to talk to the married men, okay, about their evolution in singleness. How have they become the men that they are today? So I'm gonna throw it to Jesse. This you, ain't it?
Yeah.
Right. So shoot them.
So one of the biggest questions, or one of the start off questions we really want to ask is, how were you guys? Like, describe yourself as a single man and what you were like before marriage.
Okay, I'll go.
Go ahead, Tony.
It sounds like up until I was 23, I was a really nice guy. Like, you know, like up until 23, I was really a good dude. I was in a relationship. I was in like a 5-year relationship, and I tricked it off and spent 2 years trying to get back unsuccessfully. And at 23, I officially regained the realm of singleness, and it was all bets were off. I was hurt. I was wounded. I was angry. Every woman that I dated could not meet up to my previous girlfriend's expectations, so they were all destined to fail. I was hunting. I had a period where I was hunting. I had a period where I had these wonderful romances, like these entanglement. You know, and I was very selfish. Like, I did have like some rules. Like, I had like one of my primary rules is I never messed with anybody in the church. That was a hard, fast rule for me, because I didn't want to bring anybody that would not have normally been involved in the kind of shenanigery I was in. I didn't want to expose them to that. Like, I didn't want them to follow their heart off a cliff. And that's what being with me romantically was going to be. So then, like, I did that pretty much until maybe like my late, when I just started, I got tired of having snacks on it, a meal. Like, I was like spiritually and emotionally malnourished, and I craved for something more. So I know it sounds really, really, really tough, but all of those years, I think, provided the adequate seasoning for me to be a good husband now, right? Mm-hmm. Like, you know, like I got all that mistake on me, all of those hard lessons, all of those like realization that like selfishness is real, that your actions have consequences. That was the big learning when I like healed emotionally from the fact that I couldn't get my ex back. Was like, no, what you do has consequences. You are not so charming or so funny or so smart that, like, you know, you can limerick your way back into a circumstance. And so that was the first time that I realized that emotionally I'm working without a net here, right? You know what I mean? Like, you know, like if I fall or fail, I break my heart. Don't do right. I'm not honest. If I'm not legitimate, it can all fall apart. And so that was very important for me to learn that, like, you know, you have to take it that seriously. So yeah, so as a single man, good trouble, but a lot of trouble.
Okay. Okay. Roger, what about you?
I don't know. I think in my singleness, I always had like I kind of came up in the church, and so I kind of had a thought of dating to marriage. You know, like I was kind of one of those guys where I was mindful of marriage and how getting there. So that was kind of my MO I was like a serial dater, right? So I was like down to date and be like exclusive. Like that was just my thing. It's kind of what I grew up with. And so, and then I had some examples of men who I was like, yeah, that's not it. I don't really want to do that. I don't want to be like that. So I think that shaped kind of how I was moving. And then, you know, I think Tony had 23, mine was 29, where I was just like, let's be an idiot. And then I just became an idiot for like a solid year and did things completely out of my character and behaved in ways that I was like, who are you, man? And then it, you know, took some time to get back to like some sense of normalcy. And then here we are.
Yeah,
Love it.
So you got a little dirt on you. You got a little
That's
dirt
it,
on you.
man. Got to.
Just want to point out, if you guys have been listening to other episodes, so we talked about this in probably the first or second episode, or both, about a man knowing where he is in his story, right, and his evolution, where he is. So, you know, we heard a lot about baggage from exes that was unprocessed, but this is how we was figuring it out, right, and eventually coming out of that, right, and then also standards. It was like, this is what I'm not finna do, but I'm open to these kind of things. So just wanted to point that out as things that we had talked about previously, and I thought those were beautiful examples of it coming back. So thank you, gentlemen.
Mm-hmm. Do you guys think that while y'all were in it, it sounded like, Roger, you knew like at 29 you were about to be a mess for, maybe you didn't know the length of time, but you knew you were about to do this. And then Tone, because of the heartbreak, do you think like after that you were just like, all bets off, I'm gonna do my thing, and I know I'm gonna say it like we've been saying it, but I know I'm in trash behavior? Would you say that's what y'all knew where y'all were at?
I think like what Roger said in the production meeting was very important, and I think it's probably a good indicator on who you're dealing with. I didn't like I grew up in church, but I was not in the church, and my role models and examples were not men that were dating to marry, right? Like, you know, we were all, you know, post-apocalyptic vagabonds searching for skirts, right? Like, you know, like that was the objective, like that was the goal, and to be quite honest, did not feel wrong. Like and because it's a different life, it's on a different page, right? So like, you know, like if you're on the kind of the page and track that Roger was on, all of your examples are like people living in monogamy, and the contrast between good people and bad people is very clear. When you are on the other side, the contrast between good people and bad people and good motivations and good reasoning and like all the emotional and spiritual stuff, like all of that is just gumbo. And it's just, does it taste good? The flavor is right? It isn't until you take a good look at it that you realize everything that's in that pot. And then you have to decide, is this good or right for me? So at the time, like I knew I didn't want to lie. I knew I didn't want to be a liar. You know, I knew I didn't want to be, you know, out there breaking young girls' hearts, right? Like, you know, but ultimately the boxes that I wanted to check for myself, that was more important, right? So like, you know, and so the woman's feelings were more so industrial waste, collateral damage to me, my own needs. Now, hopefully that collateral damage was minimal, and you just maybe had a couple of cries and had to talk to your homegirls for a little bit. But the potential was that you could get hurt. None of that was my responsibility because I had the standard like flags that single men operate under, which is, I told you I wasn't trying to get no relationship. You know what I mean? Like, you know, I thought we was just kidding. So we under the cloud of the gray, which doesn't make me responsible or makes me culpable for your feelings. And so as long as I can operate with the fine print and whatever social contract we constructed, I can walk away guilt-free, leaving all the hurt on another person. And so that's the mind game that you play. So yeah, it was deliberate. It just wasn't malicious, if that makes any sense, if that's not paradoxical.
Yeah. And I think on the other track, if you would, if we're two tracking this with Tony and I, there's still room to hurt people.
Oh yeah.
Right. So like in my space, being a serial relationship dude or not, or being in the church or not, like there's still space to hurt people, and still space because at the end of the day, there's selfishness is reigning on both track. And that selfish behavior is the biggest culprit to hurting somebody. You're just selfish. That's point blank. You're just selfish.
Let that preach, okay? Let that sink in.
Say
We
la.
purposely took that. Yeah, say la. That's what that was. Let that sink in. Okay. So moving forward, you guys, what made your wife different than anyone else that you previously dated? Roger, we'll start with you.
I think Adrian has always been my boy, right? We've always been tight. We've been friends. I've known Adrian since he was 15 and I was 18. Went to the same church together. Lives parted. Moved to LA, went to school. All these things. She got married, got divorced. All these things. Life happened, but she was always my boy. And I think, and she still is. And I think the difference with her was that she was my boy, and she was also someone who I was very much attracted to. Right. So like I was getting the best in both spaces. And I think fundamentally, I believe that she was better than me in some respects. You know, like Adrian is just, she'll say the vice versa about me. Right. She'll be like, no, whatever. But I know about her and her character and who she is and what she brings to the table. And I know that that's a win for me. And so yeah, I think in terms of her difference, it was the boyness, but it's not to say that like relationship prior to her, like these people were bad people or what have you. It's really probably more about me and having not been ready. And then the bigger, so that was that point. And then the point about them is the truth of the matter is that wasn't God's best for me. Right. And it wasn't that person was bad. You just weren't God's best for me. And me locking down and being with someone who was God's best for me was ultimately the move. Right. I'm going to take that over anything else.
Yeah.
Yeah. Tony?
Yeah, I think for me, like, my wife ain't all that impressed with me. Okay, let me modify that.
Right, she gonna see this like, right.
No, Kendra was not impressed with the things that most of the other women I was dating was impressed with. Like, she was impressed with the same thing, just in the micro, not the macro, right? Like, you know, like I'm funny and I'm witty, and these are all things that I believe about myself. Me and Kendra could laugh till like 12 o'clock in the morning over stuff. She's seen me perform live maybe 3 times, right? So she's not interested in that part of it, like the show part, the big part. She was always interested in the small part, I brought her over to my apartment. I had all this stuff. She was more concerned with like what I did for a living versus the byproduct of what I had. So that's what threw me off is that it was just like, oh my God, I think she likes me. Like, do I even like me? Right. Like, and I think the most important thing was that she was one of the first women that had a tremendous strength of character. She was strong. And it was that strength that like I couldn't bully my way through. I couldn't take the pole position. She was the first woman that I met that was built to be a co-pilot and not a passenger. And that was tremendously different for me. And what I realized is that that's the type of person that aligns well with my personality, right? Like, like my ego can have a voracious appetite. Kendra's spirit is my diet, right? Like, you know, like she keeps me grounded. She keeps me anchored. She keeps me focused. And it has everything to do with her anchoring qualities. And that was that. And I became very much addicted to and interested in that because it was a reflection, kind of like to what Roger was saying, like being better than me. The things about her that I was most impressed with, I didn't see reflected in myself, right? Like her strength of character, her honesty, and her sense of integrity. I didn't have any of that. And so by like the more time I spent with her, the more time I got that on me. Mm-hmm. And then I was able to take those good characteristics with my characteristics. Okay, now I'm somebody you might want to be with, you know? And so that was really the big difference on my end.
And you already mentioned something about like changing in your character. What do you think that in your singleness that you had to change to step in and get ready for marriage? You mentioned some already.
Yeah, I had to really sacrifice like these things that I thought were the right way to do things. Like I made a pledge with myself when I first started getting serious with Kendra that like everything I had done before her, I'm going to do 100% the opposite. Like everything that I did before, because whatever I thought I was doing, I couldn't pinpoint it. It couldn't be specific. All I knew is that I'm going to do the opposite of what I had done before, because clearly what I was doing before was not working. And I did not want to mess this up. And it goes back to that early relationship that I told you about, like pre-single. I was in love. It was young love, but you know, it was love. And I remember that first date out with Kendra, I felt that thing. Like I felt that thing, that spark. I know what that is. I know what that is. I had that before. With the first girl. And I immediately would get goosebumps talking about it right now. It was like, I didn't ever think I was going to find that thing again. I am not throwing away my shot, right? You know what I mean? Like, you know, I'm doing everything that I need to do. I'm taking inventory of everything, lift this hood up, do the 64-point inspection, and everything that I did that I think might have caused a poison in my relationships before, I'm doing the opposite. And that's exactly how it played out for the first. And I really feel like myself. Like I didn't feel comfortable. Like I kind of felt like at any moment, like she was gonna say she wasn't into it. But I literally was just like, I'm gonna make myself available, which is things that I didn't do before. I'm gonna tell the truth, which is things that I didn't do before. I'm gonna put her needs above mine, which are things that I didn't do before. The brunch on Sunday and I prefer to play Madden, I'm going to brunch on Sunday and play Madden on Monday. I started to give more of myself instead of taking more like from her. And that was the change. That's what the first 6 months. Now I could have learned all of that in Roger's class. That all of that was important. I didn't have that. So I was kind of like an early sailor. I used the stars, you know what I mean, and my instincts to kind of figure out the right way to go. And I got lucky. I was lucky because I could have easily blown that by not taking it serious. And part of the reason why I took it serious is because I remembered that feeling. I knew that I had the love spark very quickly.
That's good. I love it. All right. Well, that was the single phase, huh?
You want to answer that, Roger?
Oh yeah, Roger, did you go?
Changes.
I think the biggest change, and we talked about this a little bit, was, and it sounds really dramatic, but I had to die. The single version of me had to die. It's the biggest change from married to single, and so the single version of me moved in a particular type of way. I thought a particular type of way. I got my needs met a particular type of way because I was only really concerned about me, single. I was just me. And so the selfish proclivities that I had, it's not to say that I'm like completely dead and I have no selfish bones in my body. This is a process. My wife will tell you, this is a process. But the flagship of that was the way I moved there, I couldn't move the same way. And the analogy I gave before was like playbooks, right? So like it was college ball, single life, graduate to pro ball, married life. And they're both awesome and they both have great playbooks, but I was learning that I was trying to take my single playbook and play here and I was getting rocked. And I was having issues after issues within my married space. And I was like, I'm a good dude. Why am I having problems? But the issue was I was just moving in a way that wasn't conducive to my environment. And I had to change. And I got a lot of that help through our premarital class. I got a lot of help just from other men, point blank telling me, other married men, like, hey, bro, you're wrong. Yeah, you're wrong. You're wrong. And like hearing another man just tell me straight up, you're wrong, just really shifted me. And hearing another woman tell my wife, Roger's wrong in this area. He's gonna be wrong again because he's learning, and you have to position yourself to be ready to forgive him again. What kind of love hocus pocus is that? Like that's how you're moving through the space with like this pre-embodied forgiveness bag that you have. I was like, hey man, I gotta be better, bro. If you're out here just prepared to forgive me again on some dumb stuff, like, bro, I have to be better. I have to be better. Yeah.
Can I jump in here, because we talked about this too in terms of identifying places of ego and pride that can oftentimes stop a man on his evolution away from the trash, because he values that ego and that pride. Like I'm right or I'm wrong, but I don't want to admit that I'm wrong. So can you talk about either when, other men would come to you like you're wrong, and how did you prepare yourself to receive that in love? And then even if sometimes we've talked about when wives have had to come and be like, yeah, no, I mean, forgiveness is great. And we love that, but there's also the like, yeah, bro, you wrong. Like, how does that all play? Yeah,
we had a very specific, it was very early in our marriage. I think maybe like a month in, there was something I wanted to, it was a friend of mine, a girl that I work with, and she was leaving. Her and her husband were moving somewhere, and I was like, I'm gonna go stay by the Beatrice, or whatever. I'm going over here. And my wife was like, you going to some girls? Like, what? And I was like, what do you mean? What am I doing? I could do this. And so we had a head. And so I remember I went anyway. I was like, I don't know why you're making this a big deal. And then we sat down with our marriage mentors and we had this conversation because we were beefing about it. And so I laid out my point. Hey, Corey, man, this is what happened, man. Talking to my marriage mentor. And he was just like, and Adrian laid out her point, and he said, Roger, do you hear the depth and like the brevity of her point? Like how well thought out it is, and how yours does not have those same characteristics. And he just called me on it, and I was like, he just was meeting me at every turn. And so that's what that was like. And it really helped. And then watching my wife's response to it, she didn't like gloat it over me. She wasn't like, nah, she was just like, she was committed to me being better. And part of me being better was helping me through that process, which I very much appreciated how gracefully we went through that. So yeah, man. And I'm thankful to have had the pleasure to be that for another man. Right. Recently I did that. I had a conversation. Somebody hit me up like, hey, Raj, how do I do this? Because she's doing this and I don't And I heard him, but I could hear where he was leaving out truths. And I was like, hey, man, you're lying. You should just say what really happened. You said something foul and she responded to it. So how about you don't say foul stuff?
How about it?
And I was like, don't call me and omit truths, because that's a waste of my time and yours, and I can't help you that. Be completely honest, and then we can have a conversation. So it was good to be on both sides of that. So I hope that answers your question.
No, it doesn't. I feel like it's one of those things of like, everybody wants to be the hero on their own story, right? It's like you always want to present your best self. You always want to come off looking great, but it's like, sometimes you miss the mark. It's all right.
Most times you miss the mark. 95 times you miss the mark. Just be honest about it. What are you doing? That's back to owning your own stuff. Don't come to me. And now I've counseled you on like a half truth, and then you go back and tell your spouse like, well,
'Cause
Roger
you
said
wanna be
you some, so you should. Hey man, don't do that. Like, let's be adults. Let's really be adults.
Yeah.
If I could chime in, like that's so, it's so true. And again, I think like to like break the like fourth wall or whatever, like you see, I think like, you know, with me and Roger, two men in with two different like support systems and infrastructures, right? Like, you know, like Roger has a lot from this conversation, has a lot of resources, right? Like, you know, good people into. Every man has a reservoir of resources like that. Minus that, I think you find maybe someone like me who is a lot more introspective and has a lot of those conversations with myself. So, for example, I came to a similar conclusion in the sense that I realized, like, I don't have enough tools in this toolbox to build anything. Hold on, sweetie, I'm on. I don't have enough tools in this toolbox to build anything, right? Like, emotionally, I only have the ability to activate one or two tools. So I want to tell my wife that she hurt my feelings, but I don't have that tool. So all I can do is be angry, right? Like, you know, or things aren't going well at my job and I'm really feeling disappointed, but I don't have that tool in my toolbox. So I'm going to be angry, right? And so it isn't until I realize, like, oh man, there's a whole lot more emotions. There's a lot of tools that I can use to have the appropriate response for what I'm feeling. And that meant that, like, oh, now I've got empathy. Oh, awesome. I can build something with empathy. Oh, like, you know, I've got fear. Oh, I can tell my wife I'm afraid. You know what I mean? I can tell my wife that I'm disappointed. I can tell my wife that I'm ashamed. Awesome, right? And so now I've got all of these tools to be a much more complete man, right? Like, and they're actually all of these things that like men have traditionally treated as like negatives actually are additional superpowers. Like empathy in a man is super. Like having empathy for your wife and understanding what she's going through and the road that she's walking in. Like if you don't have that ability, you later, sweetheart. Thank you, baby.
Y'all both have to do this, by the way.
Welcome to quarantine.
It is. I don't fight it no more. I don't fight it at all.
I've been waiting for Addison to come pop in.
I'm not at our residence, which is the only reason why I'm knowing it.
I was about to say, because I was waiting for Addie to come in, like
all day.
Hi guys.
All day.
Okay, sweetie. All right. Sorry about that, Gary.
No.
All good.
My brain's going.
I'm surprised it's just been one thus far. But but I think you guys like get the point that I'm making, right? It's just like, you know, whether it be other men helping you access those tools or you recognize that you're missing them. The important thing is that you're searching and you're open, right? Like, you know, to like both pieces. And a man that either A, does not have a cadre of other men to be his support system, or B, doesn't seem very introspective and interested in himself, those would be like red flags for me. Like, you know, like a man that always has the hood up on his life and always 100%. Got them tools in there tinking, like that's a good dude. Because he knows that he can get more out of his engine. He can get more out of himself and more out of his spirit than someone who like is always resting on his laurels, like I'm a done product. That's not what it is at all.
Yeah. One of the things I always say is like self-awareness is a superpower. Like it's kind of like
the
motto of my life.
Yes.
And so, but I feel like one of the reasons we wanted to do this series is we've talked about how it's almost expected for women to lean into that, right, and have like these emotional places to go and talk through their feelings, and like you said, Tone, not really having that like emotional lexicon of like there's other things that exist here besides anger, because societally we're not really training our boys or, you know, encouraging our dudes to be about that, you know, that life of like digging a little bit deeper. And so I think that, you know, those are beautiful points that you guys have brought up about like it's very important you alone by yourself to be figuring these things out, so that, you know, when that person comes into view, you're not playing catch up, that you're already sort of, you know, plugged in and prepping, doing warm up, if you will. So let's continue in that vein. So we've gone on a singleness track. So now we jump into the marriage track, which Vaughn, I know you're very passionate about. So I'm gonna kick it to you, sis. Let's go.
So the first question we have for you is, what types of sacrifices? I know women, like, they always see the sacrifices that women make in the marriage, but what types of sacrifices do you both think that you have made that are often overlooked?
I think on like a really small scale, I'm gonna say this just to break into it. The small sacrifice has been that I can't buy as many shoes as I would like to buy.
That's hard.
It's a real truth. Okay. We've made an agreement. It's 4 pair a year at this point, and that's just kind of, we're moving from that space. On the bigger scale, I think it's just the biggest sacrifice. I think is just putting myself down. You know, there's such a fear that if I don't hold my own flag, then no one will care about it, right? But trusting that my wife actually does care about my flag. She does care about the things that are concerning me. And she isn't just only care about herself. She's mindful of me. The same way I'm putting myself down to be mindful of her, she's doing the same thing for me. And that fear, getting over that fear that if I didn't make my point made, then no one was, then I would just be underserved and I would be missing out, or I'd be losing, or whatever. Any of those points was not true in my marriage. And we have a shirt, married over right, which is just to say, you in marriage sometimes you got to choose. You want to be married or you want to be right. Sometimes you can't have both. And so and putting my right flag down, that's a big sacrifice, because moving through the world, especially as a man, you're kind of positioned that like you have to stake your claim and you have to demand the things that you want, and you are right and you have to push for it and all those things, and just having to kind of to peel some of that stuff back in my married life, because it didn't all apply. I was trying to stage manage my marriage and trying to like use the same tools that I was using at work and to like get through life here with her, and that wasn't working. So I had to just adjustments, I think, is the biggest sacrifice. Just adjustments.
Adjustments and shoes. I love it.
That's a heavy question. I think I've been prepared for everything that you guys have thrown at me this conversation, except for that question, because I haven't really thought that through, and I don't want my initial comments to not be like reflective of my true heart or spirit. But like, one of the things that I do recognize that marriage, this is my opinion, marriage is a choice. It's a choice every day, right? Like, you know, like my little girl's father, like I'll never be able to choose to not be their dad, right? Like, you know, but I can choose to not be married to my wife, right? Like, you know, like a thing called divorce exists. Now, it's not what you want, but every day you make a choice. And then ultimately it gets to the point where it doesn't even feel like a choice. But but in the grand scheme of things, it is. And I think one of the things that you sacrifice is, and it's purely fictitious and make-believe, but like another version of your life that could have existed if you had not gotten married, right? And this gets into your psyche, like it gets into your spirit, because there are times where, you know, like, oh, you know, I would have traveled more, or I would have done this, or I'd have done that. All these things that are untethered from being like a husband and a father. And you have those thoughts on the toughest days of a marriage. So you have to sacrifice these things that are not possible, not realistic, or even things that you truly want, to remind yourself to like stay focused, right? You got to give the keys to the right version of yourself every day. Because I don't pretend that some of the worst parts of me aren't tethered to my spirit and soul. I'm still a lot of the same dude that I was years ago. He's just not in control. He's not in power, and he's not behind the wheel. So, and there's some parts about that guy that I like. Like, I don't like some of the bad sides, but there's a certain energy and there's a vibe and je ne sais quoi. You know what I mean? Like there's some stuff about them that's cool. And I think, you know, every day you got to be certain that you give the keys to the right driver. You know what I mean? And sometimes that guy doesn't go where you always want to go. He's more responsible than you prefer to be. You know what I mean? Like, you know, he's more selfless than you have the mood or energy for. And you have to do that, right? Like, you know, and so that's a really good question, because again, it taps into like some dark sides of the Force that has you look at this thing in totality. Now, I love my wife and I love my marriage and I love my family, but like I'm a complete person, you know what I mean, who has doubts and has fears and has regrets and has all these different things. And just because I love my wife and we have an amazing family doesn't mean that there isn't some stuff still inside me that I got to either understand, identify, or get out. And so always knowing that, like, this is why, like, I never want to, like, if ever I'm fussing with my wife, and we don't fuss that frequently, but if we do, I never want to say something that I can't get back into my mouth. I never want to, I never want to, yeah. Like, I never want to have it be like 3 months later and me being like, I can't believe I said that to her. I can't believe I made her feel that way. Like, I can't, you know what I mean? And that's giving the key to the wrong dude in the wrong situation. Yeah. So
to your point, Tony, it's like there's a I always say there's a king and a kid in every man.
Come on.
Who you speak to or who you give the keys to is who will respond to you.
Yeah, man. We got to take a pause right there. We got to say la. Breathe it in. Breathe it out on that one. Okay. So many amazing, incredible gems, sound bites, tweetable quotes, all that stuff. So make sure you guys come back for part two.
Yes.
Part two with these married men, man. It's going to be amazing. So we'll see you right back here soon on the Intermission Podcast.
Bye.
We'd love to hear from our homies, so feel free to email us at intermissionhg, as in homegirls, that's intermissionhg@gmail.com. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on Instagram at intermissionhg. Until next time, this has been A Break with Your Homegirls.